What is up, everybody? My name is Helen Garcia, aka Messy Hair Girl, aka the host of Yellow Chair Collective, the podcast. Today's episode, we dive deep into setting boundaries, the importance of solitude, and core values with my mentor, Brandon Shindo. Brandon is the co-founder of K&B Therapy, a group practice that helps young adults, professionals, students, and people of color. We discuss tips for setting appropriate boundaries and determining whether or not a situation aligns with your own core values. Today, we help you understand what it means to work with passion and with healthy balance. So join me today if that's something that you struggle with, and let's start the show.
So excited to be here today.
Yeah, first question to ask you, how's your mental health? How's it been these last couple weeks?
It's been actually pretty good. I have been challenging myself to socialize a lot more recently. And I have a really great social network that has brought a lot of laughs and a lot of good energy. So that's been really nice to be around.
Yeah, it's funny because when I first met you, I was an intern. I was a social work intern. You were my field instructor. And I've seen the evolution of you and getting to a place of health, taking care of your health and nutrition. Can you take me back to where you were 3 years ago before you started K&B Therapy?
That's a great question. And it's so interesting. 3 years ago, I guess in some ways it can be seen as a long time, but it feels like yesterday, where I can remember 3 years before we started our group practice, I was so burnt out emotionally and physically. I think that for me, the psychosomatic symptoms became so prevalent that I had no choice but to eventually make shifts and have to force myself to slow down because I was no longer able to repress and just ignore things.
Can you tell people what psychosomatic symptoms are and how they know that they're emotionally and mentally burnt out?
Great question. Psychosomatic symptoms are really this correlation between our mental health and our physical health. And so for myself in particular, I started to notice a lot of joint pains, a lot of fatigue. And as I sat there and really thought about it, I started to notice a correlation between when I was feeling more stressed or when I was feeling more anxious. And behold, a day later, I would have these flare-ups in my wrists or in my hands or my knees. And over time, you try to rule things out and you go seek medical advice and recommendations. And they all were coming back of you need to slow down, that you're pushing your body beyond its capabilities right now. And we have to let it heal and recover.
Your story is so relatable because as an Asian American, there's the model minority myth of we have to be the best. We have to show up 10 times more than our white counterparts. And so I find myself in that journey constantly of I have a headache right now, but I want to keep working. And so for people that don't know you, you actually quit a job that you dedicated your whole life to, and you started a group practice. And behind closed doors in the conversations that we've had, I know all of the work that you've done on yourself in order to get to this place of health. And so take me back to those moments of up and down, those struggles of even in the group practice, you still found yourself overworking and being burnt out. What was that journey like for you to getting to this place now?
It's so interesting. I was having this conversation with my business partner, Kaylee, the other day. People often think that our story started the day we graduated from graduate school. I was really thinking about this, and I realized that my story started before I was even born. My story started with my grandparents being survivors of the Japanese American internment camps. My story started with my parents being blue-collar workers in the construction industry. It was there that there were certain values that started to be developed that I think as an Asian American started to really take fruition in those moments. And I always think there are these pivotal points in my lifetime that it's important for me to reflect upon, because if those points did not happen, I would have never gone to graduate school. I would have never went to go work where I did for so long and never would have started a group practice. And so when I think about growing up, there was this notion that when you're doing nothing, that's lazy, and you need to push yourself beyond your capabilities because you want to make it in this hard lifetime. And I can remember certain times in my teenage years being with my grandfather. He was at UCLA, in and out of the hospital, and he would point down at the UCLA campus and be like, one day that's going to be you down there. And as a teenager, being a little bit delinquent here and there, grandpa, like, that's not going to happen. But he saw something inside of me. And I think those were one of those pivotal moments. Now we fast forward from that point, probably about 6 years from that point forward, I end up at UCLA as an undergrad studying there. And one of my grandfather's last words to me is that at this campus, you're going to find people who are going to be your ohana, your tribe, that are going to help you get to the next level. And I did. I found my mentor there. And this was a gentleman who, despite what everybody else were telling me, I wasn't fit for grad school, I just needed to go to work, grad school was not an option, he saw something inside of me. Because I didn't want to let these people down, I pushed extra hard. And so I find myself in graduate school, excelling, doing really well. And so I'm pushing hard for about the next 8 years until all of a sudden, body starts to break down. Mental health starts to deteriorate. And I start to realize that, like, that time I was in my late 20s, that I had pushed so hard for a good decade that my body now was saying, I've had enough. And so when the pandemic happened, it was a blessing in disguise in some ways, because it was like as if somebody pulled the emergency brake and said, you're done. You've had enough. What are you going to do now? And as soon as that emergency brake was pulled, there was Kaylee, my business partner, standing at my door telling me how she felt a similar way. And so I thought, what better person to jump on a new journey with and a new chapter with than somebody who has a very similar story as my own, and we had similar values.
I want to pause there because I think that a lot of people see transformation as, oh, I just thought of it and I jumped for it. But what you're talking about is you identified a problem. And the more that I do this type of work, I'm realizing that burnout is not just burning out of energy. It's feeling like you don't have control over your life anymore. It's the absence of control. And so you identified a problem. You tried to figure out how to solve this problem that you had for yourself. And it led to this year-long, not even year-long, like 3 or 4 year-long journey of having to figure out what this was. And so can you tell me about the loyalty that you felt to keep going and how you started to unlearn that? Because I think that a lot of people struggle with that.
They do. And I think on a firsthand basis, there was this point of not wanting to let my past like supervisors down, letting my current clients down, and not wanting to be seen as a quitter. It was this mindset that was instilled with me so strongly. And it wasn't until I started to realize that not only was I experiencing burnout on a physical level, but I was also starting to feel it on an emotional level. And so the hunger that I had when I had entered in this field was starting to dwindle. And I started to have what we classify as like compassion fatigue, where the level of empathy, the level of care, like just wasn't there. It started to become a job. At that exact time, I received an email from one of my mentors, and he always had a way of reading my mind in some ways. And he sent me this email that said, quitting doesn't make you a bad person. And sometimes quitting is the ultimate form of finding our own self-worth. And at that moment, he said, there's a big difference between quitting because you're afraid versus quitting because you know it's the best thing for you to do. And it was almost in that moment, just like this weight off my shoulder was relieved that, oh, it's okay to quit. And then from there, whether it was from things that were manifesting or whatever was going on, I started to have these shifts in my environment where I started to realize that where no opportunity lies, I'm going to create opportunity. And so I think that this shift from burnout, of how do we heal from it, really shifts with our mindset of how do we start to perceive things that we saw as negative and see them really as blessings in disguise.
Can you make that more concrete for me? Like when you talk about seeing opportunities, the problems are actually opportunities and escapes to quitting. Can you tell me how that manifested in your life, that change?
Definitely. I worked for a large community mental health agency for years. I want to say about 7+ years I worked there. And I started to see quite a few gaps in the system. And so at that time, I had the mindset I was going to become CEO of this company and I was going to really work my way up. And eventually I started to see these gaps and realize, okay, I can't move up in one direction. Let me create another program or sub-program in order to get management experience and like program development experience and all of these things. And so created the program or sub-program and learned as much as I could there and realized, okay, here's another barrier. I'm facing another like glass ceiling. There's not anywhere else for me to go. And so as I'm looking around, I'm thinking like, how do I realign my passions with my values, with the God-given talent I'm given as a clinician? And at that moment, Kaylee became a part of my life. And I'm thinking, okay, with her and I combined, we can combine my values, my God-given talent, as well as all the other skills that I have. And a new door opened. That door was jammed at first. We had to push on it a little bit. It just wasn't wide open. We had to work hard, open that sucker, but we eventually did. And from that point forward, I like to think like we're products of our environment, and that often has a negative connotation. But I'm proud of the environment that I came from because it's given me the character and the necessary knowledge in order to succeed where I'm at currently.
You make it sound so easy. Oh, I saw Kaylee, I went through management, this was my strategy. And I think that for people that don't know you, Brandon, you're very methodical and you're very careful about the decisions that you make. When I was working at the agency that you talked about, you sent, I think, a 3-month notice. And so it was very slow. But I think that there are people that are listening, and I've read the comments on our YouTube channel and on our podcast, that it's based on this belief that I can't stop. What about my family? What about a stable income? There are people who are Asian American that want to start a business, but don't feel like they have to, or they can. And so what advice can you give them for anyone that's listening right now?
I am very thoughtful and I really think things out before I make any decision. And I always try to think about how can we kill 2 birds with 1 stone? Is there a world where we can be very cognizant on our decisions to not dismiss our family or to say we're putting ourselves fully first? Because I think as PI, it's so ingrained in our culture and in our mentality to not forget about our ohana, about our family. And so for me, it was like, how do I invest in me knowing that my family is going to get the best version of me? Not only my current family, but my future family, my future children. And so certain sacrifices that needed to be made. Now, starting a business is hard. And there's a lot of unknowns, particularly when you come from a family where no one has worked in the medical field. And I think then the trick here is to really use your voice as a way of connecting with people in your community who have done it before you. And I think that together we're able to really find solutions to barriers that arise for us, but we also find a support network, because I couldn't have done this alone. Yeah, Kaylee is a big key player, but there are so many other people that have been there as well. And setting boundaries is a hot topic, but it's not just about saying no. It's about being able to compartmentalize. It's about being able to realize your own strengths and areas you need to, and really being able to sit with discomfort. If you can sit with discomfort, you'll be in a lot better position later on in life.
Tell me more about what people don't know about setting boundaries.
When we think about setting boundaries, people often assume that setting boundaries keep people out. But the ultimate goal of setting boundaries is to keep people closer, because by setting boundaries, that means I want to keep you within my circle, but it's got to be within certain confines and certain stipulations, because this is maybe a surprise for some, but I learned early on in life that like takers know no limits. They will take until there's nothing left to take. If I want this person to continue to be in my life, I need to develop these boundaries that show I can maybe give you 40%, 50%, 60%, but that's all I can give, because if I give any more, that creates resentment. That creates maybe agitation. and that person is no longer within the circle I want to keep them in. And so a strategy that we often recommend to PI or other communities of color is to use that technique of yes, and. Yes, I can do this for you, and I can do it maybe tomorrow or wherever it should be. Because that way we're acknowledging our core cultural beliefs and not rejecting them. We're highlighting, no, our ohana is important, but we need to set the boundaries as to when we're able to do certain things.
I love this analogy that you talk about, that there's our ohana in the inner circle. And then as the circle expands, our capacity to give to those people diminishes. And I've heard it said, I think Mark Manson said this, if it's not an F yes, it's an F no. And so I want to make this concrete for people that are listening to this, of maybe you can give input about your own life. How do you know when something is a hell yes and when something is a hell no for you?
For myself, and this is the talk I give quite often, it was really having to redefine what success and what happiness was. I think that growing up as an API based upon the model minority myth, that to be successful, I had to make $1 million. I need to have my doctorate. I need to be an attorney, anything like that. Happiness then was defined as something like pure joy, peace. And so we think these two concepts as two separate concepts. I was so stuck on just the success part. But what I've learned over the years, that in order to reach this balance between the two, 3 dynamics need to be balanced. How we define success and happiness, how do they interact with one another in the present, and lastly, how do they interact in the future? Success can lead to happiness in the future, but how can we also make them coexist in the present? And so once again, it's this big mindset shift that needs to happen. But Helen, can you repeat your question one more time? Because there was a thought I just blanked out on, and I want to make sure that I touch upon that.
Yeah, I wanted you to make it more concrete, how you know that something is a hell yes and how you know that something is a hell no for you. And I think what you just talked about is fascinating. Reflect on what those words really mean to you. Mm. But I don't want to interrupt you. What were you going to say?
I think going back to your question of, is it like a hell yes or a hell no type of mentality, is really in alignment with my value. And I think that being PI, we often code switch unintentionally as a way of survival. And I think this is where we go wrong, that we will code switch when we go home to our cultural norms, and then we'll code switch when we go to work, which may require us in Western society to be a little more dominant and assertive. But where people go wrong here is that when they switch their values. And so when their values tend to become in flux. So if our values are compassion, integrity, when those things disappear within the setting that you're in, that is a good sign that like, this is a hell no. Versus if you're able to find an alignment where regardless of wherever you go, you can show up with integrity and compassion. The way you display that may look a little different depending on the setting, but those values are the same. That is where the hell yes sits for me. And so when I'm asked to do certain engagements or I'm asked to work on a certain project, I look up what are the organizations or the company's values, and are they aligned with mine? And that kind of dictates my decision.
It's very interesting. And I feel like a lot of people don't do that. They don't sit with themselves and say, what are some of the things that I truly value as an individual? Some of the things that you said are compassion and integrity. And the root word for integrity is the act of being whole. And as API, we do that. We code switch unintentionally depending on our situation, and it almost clouds our vision and our judgment depending on where we are as people. And so I can imagine that someone listening to this is saying, okay, Brandon, how do I know then what my values are? And so can you give people some practices they could probably do? Is it sitting quietly with themselves? Is it journaling? What are some of the questions that you would ask someone?
Typically, what I'll do is provide my clients or even mentees with a list, the generic core values. And typically, without any instruction, they'll come back with a page full. There'll be like 10, 15, 20 core values. And I always share with them, you pick 2 core values, and those are the 2 that I really want you to focus on. Now, you have numerous other ones that you really feel you embrace, but I want you to pick the top 2 of them. In moments where we're feeling like life is just beating us down and we lost direction, those core values will serve as anchors. And they serve as anchors when we sit in stillness and we sit alone by ourselves. Because I just went to go see a talk recently, and the gentleman who was speaking talked about the difference between being alone in loneliness and being alone in solitude. And I thought this was genius the way he was talking about it. And I want to highlight it on today's podcast that we want to sit in solitude because of the strength in solitude. If you're able to sit there in stillness, be present with your thoughts, and really reflect on how are your core values showing up in these different aspects of life, there'll be a lot more clarity because you're starting to filter out all the experiences that are no longer serving you. They're just noise. They're just distractions. It can still happen now, even if it's only a couple minutes per day or a couple minutes per week.
So the last thing that you said was there's a difference between being alone and being in solitude. And I think that because of the pandemic, I feel as if it may be pattern recognition, but a lot of people are now embedded with so much noise. And stillness, it takes a journey to even get to that place again. And I'm wondering what the definition of stillness is and how you continue to not necessarily achieve that, but practice that in your day-to-day so that you can be in recognition of some of those thoughts.
Great question. Stillness for me is another way of saying self-acceptance. Being able to sit with myself and accept myself for who I am has been a big journey, and it doesn't come easy. And I think it's something we continually have to work on. But recognizing your worth as a human being does not ebb and flow. It's the one consistent we have in this lifetime. What does shift, though, is our perception of what our value is based upon other people's perceptions. And I think recognizing, I'm noticing like my confidence go up and down, but that doesn't impact my self-worth, has been a huge game changer. And when I was able to do that, I was able to sit in the stillness, because before, when I thought my worth was ebbing and flowing, stillness was scary. It was something that was so scary and uncomfortable. But now that I'm comfortable with who I am and I know what I bring to the table, stillness is something more of that solitude where I notice that it recharges me. It allows me to re-energize and to gear up and get ready for whatever next journey comes. It's my way.
I love what you just said. There's a difference between confidence in a given situation and your own self-worth. Break that down for me, because I have never heard someone say it in that way before.
I think when we think of self-confidence, a lot of times if we are partaking in a new task, we may feel a little uneasy because we're not as good as we had hoped to be. And so in some ways, confidence becomes our own subjective perception of how good we are. And so we may feel nervous, we may feel anxious and things like, but our worth as an individual does not change. That you are as worthy of a person, whether you are an amazing basketball star or whether you can't dribble a ball and walk at the same time. Talent may be different and your confidence level may ebb and flow, but your worth as a human being is the same from the day that you're born to the day that you die. It stays exactly the same.
You tie confidence and self-worth with self-acceptance. And so when you talk about these three principles, I almost see it like a house, that self-acceptance is the foundation of this home called self-worth, and confidence is like the rooftop. Sometimes it's going to rain, sometimes the wind is going to blow back and forth, but the roof will always stay the roof. But if you don't have the confidence, it doesn't really make a difference. It just starts with knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are. And so how did you get to that place of accepting all of who you were? What was that dark moment and how did you get out of that?
I think that dark moment for me was this notion of, why am I beating myself up over other people's perception of me, when at the end of the day, I know that those same people who are beating me up don't even like themselves that much. And that may sound like a little harsh, but it was like a reality that I noticed, that like these same people who are saying like I'm X, Y, and Z are the same people I see with low self-confidence. So who are they to judge me? Only I can judge me. And this is something once again, I'm in my later 30s now, and it's taking me time to get there. But I think that as I have these conversations with individuals like yourself, or even with my colleagues or good friends, it's like a process that continues to play in my mind of like, how do I maintain my understanding that my worth is always solid? It never shifts. It takes continual work in order to maintain that mentality, because very easily I can shift back to, oh my gosh, like, doesn't like me. My confidence is low. I'm not worthy. And so it's just like going to the gym. We got to maintain our muscles and our health by continuing working out. The same applies to this concept.
That's so good. I think that requires such an intentional mindfulness practice of seeing who somebody is. And the more that I practice mindfulness, the more that I realize that we're not actually our thoughts. Our thoughts are a manifestation of the context of each environment. And so when you talk about this pillar of self-worth, we do stay stagnant. We stay strong in that foundation, but our mind can shift in and out like that roof that we were talking about. And so I really enjoy your perspective of it, of take inventory of your context and your environment. If it's true that we are the 5 people that we surround ourselves with, what do they believe? What do they spirit? And I think that almost taking inventory of that allows us to understand where our beliefs are coming from, like a sociological perspective looking out so we can understand the in. Yeah. And Brandon, tell me about the change that started to happen to you when you started to take away the self-worth and having it be categorized by other people. Who then did you start to surround yourself with, and what are some of their common values and characteristics?
When I started to embrace my current mindset that I have now, I have found individuals who I always say are like my honorary brothers and sisters, that their values not only mirror mine, but they complement mine where they are different a little bit. And in some ways, it's okay. For so long, I was searching for people like this. And the one barrier that was there is because I didn't know who I was. And once I found myself, these people naturally, we gravitated together. And I was just telling Kaylee this not too long ago that some people say, oh, my inner circle is not a circle anymore. It's literally a dot. And it's like a period on a paper. And that's okay. And I'm okay with that, because that period it's strong. And I know that at the end of the day, they will stand behind me. And so the manifestation of this mindset has led to individuals being behind me who are going to make me stronger and take me to a far another level than I couldn't take myself. I needed Ohana Atrad behind me to do so. And so this one mindset shift can make some of your wildest dreams start to come true and become reality.
Less is more. Yeah. If you just have a dot, and that dot is stronger than 100 people, I think you can take down an entire army of negative beliefs, which is so incredible. Brandon, I want to be respectful of time because we have about 10 minutes left. I want to talk about where you were in your childhood, because I don't want to just let that go as a common chapter. You talked about your ancestors and your Japanese American roots, the Japanese internment camps. I don't think we talk about generational trauma enough and generational strength enough either. So can you tell me about what that was like for you to understand the context of what life was like before you were born and how that affects you today?
For myself, I identify as the 4th generation Japanese American. And so my ancestors have been here for a good minute. And my grandparents, I was blessed to be raised a large portion of my life by them. And what was so interesting is that there was these certain perspectives and mindset, which as a clinician now, I see as generational trauma, I see as anxiety and things that plagued my ancestors. And because of that, there was this level of having a scarcity mindset that we always need to do because we don't know what is going to be taken away from us. We always need to try harder. And in some ways, while that instilled a really hard work ethic in me, it also started to create like these unrealistic expectations in other ways. And so looking back, my grandparents did the best that they could with their children and with their grandchildren. And as I see my folks who also embrace like the scarcity mindset in a lot of ways, we were just having this conversation the other day, and they said that we did the best that we could given our circumstances. And now we want you to take our circumstances and your own privilege and use them in a way to break generational cycles. And one of the way that they've encouraged me to do it, and I took advantage of, was through education, of becoming a clinician to understand what plagued my ancestors. Because as a child, I was super anxious all the time. I was super on fight or flight mode because I always felt like I needed to be the savior of my family and help them get from one position to the next. And while I realized that it was out of love, I now know like it's one of my personal goals is to make sure that the next generation doesn't face that. And so my grandparents' experience in the internment camps greatly dictated the path of my family. But I like to tell people now that it won't define us anymore. It was something that impacted us, but now's our opportunity as a fourth generation Japanese American to define what is it going to mean to be a healthy, successful Japanese American. And that's a goal that I have of mine, that if my family didn't go through what they went through, I don't think that would have been my perspective.
I see myself in your story because I'm a 1.5 gen Filipina American. And when you talked about the scarcity mindset, I immediately went to being 5 years old and my parents giving me a plastic bag. It was dripping rain on the outside and we had to run to our apartment because we didn't have a car. And I think that we don't understand how our past experiences can very much so dictate our present situation. Because even down to the most concrete manifestations of it, like money, education, even our perceptions of our future children, like how they should live their life, affect us based on what our ancestors and what we went through as children. And I love how you talked about your parents and how your upbringing viscerally affected that scarcity mindset. So for people that don't understand, Brandon, who are just still in the scarcity thinking, how do you deal with that on a day-to-day basis? Because it doesn't just go away like that, right? It takes time.
I think that for so long, if you grew up in a multi-generational household where the scarcity mindset is the norm, to really start acknowledging, when is this happening? And when it is happening, what is the function behind that thought process? And so for my great-grandparents, for my grandparents, and for my parents, it was a form of survival in a lot of ways. I ask myself, what is that mindset? How does that serve me in this moment? There are certain times where maybe financially, in my past when I was growing up, like we were struggling. And so I see having that scarcity mindset's important. But certain times it's just a habit. There is no function behind it in the moment. It's just comfort because that's the way I grew up thinking. And so being able to challenge those thoughts and be like, okay, it serves no purpose for me right now. Let me take a different perspective on the situation. Is this fear that's coming up as a scarcity mindset, or is it something else?
So let's flip the script a little bit. If this is what scarcity mindset looks like, what does abundance mindset look like?
Acceptance and peace.
What does that look like for you now?
Acceptance and peace mean going back to being able to sit in stillness. Being able to sit in stillness in such a way that I am content with what I don't have in the moment, knowing that it can be achievable in the future, but that's for the future and that's to find out then. But to be present here in the moment. And I think that you truly know when you've hit that point is when the people around you bring you more peace than this feeling of, oh my gosh, I need to shapeshift, I need to code switch, I need to do all these things in order to fit in. I love having social gatherings with my circle now because I feel like I can show up as me, my authentic self. I can be vulnerable and know that's not going to shift anything that we have.
I feel that from Yellow Chair, like the leadership that is embodied by this organization. I feel like I can say I'm tired. And knowing you, I know that you do that as a CEO, as a leader for K&B Therapy. And so I want to give the last 4 minutes we have left space for you to talk about why you started K&B Therapy, your mission behind it, and how people can find you.
K&B Therapy is a representation of Kaylee and myself. If we had to create a symbol of who Brandon and Kaylee are, it would be K&B Therapy, hence the K and the B, right, in our logo. But I think that there is this piece where we try to make our values visible. And those values are visible through the lines of service that we provide, not only therapy, mentorship, speaking engagements, and all of those things. And part of our reason why we decided to do this was because we felt like there were a lot of shut doors. There were a lot of no's that we were hearing. And Kaylee and I always laugh about this too. We don't like to hear no in a lot of different ways. And so where there is a no, how can we find a yes? And sometimes that means taking that leap of faith and being able to find different revenues or different paths in order to get where you need to get. And as we've gone almost over 2 years now in this group practice, we found that we have attracted a lot of the individuals who were similar to ourselves, their age. And so we've become what they needed and what we needed for young adults, for young professionals, student professionals, college students, people of color. And so we are very active on social media. Our social media handle is K&B Therapy. And our website is www.knbtherapy.com. And we really highlight our values and our story, because I think it's through our story that we create relatability. Because as clinicians, my title of CEO and LCSW don't really hold that much importance to me. What holds importance to me is being able to relate to the people that come to me for help, because I want to help them navigate life and not have to make the same mistakes that I made. If I can make life that much easier, I've done my job. And so and as a better way of explaining that, K&B Therapy is an extension of who Kaylee and I are. And at the end of the day, the world's a tough place. So we try to make it that much easier.
I can attest to just the generosity of you and Kaylee as someone that knows both of you personally. I think that one of the things that you both have down to the T is just your messaging, because I love how vulnerable the two of you get from podcast interviews and public speaking gigs on your Instagram. You're very vocal about the barriers that you had to overcome as first-generation college students, the mental and emotional struggle of being a young professional. And so I think if anyone wants to work with you, I think they're probably getting 3x the value that they would otherwise get from just a regular session. Granted, everyone has their own unique strengths and weaknesses, but thank you, Brandon. I want to acknowledge your vulnerability today. It was so relaxing.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you for having me here.